looking to go through today, we're going to spend a bit of time looking at the grants. So really, what is and what isn't a grant? Why would you actually want to use a grant? A bit about the funding of grants. How would you actually make the selection of providers to work with for grants happen? And then just a little bit about the paperwork on that side. Then we're going to look into the contracting side a little bit and look at the contract management considerations that you should have with regard to that. Some of the forms of contract that you may choose to enter into, and those of you who are familiar with the NHS standard contracts, some of the adaptations that you may choose to make to accommodate working in collaboration with groups of VCSE providers, and it's very much about the collaboration side of that. But right from the very start, the first thing we're really going to do is have a little bit of a quiz, if that's okay with you. So all of you who've now joined in will have to do a little bit of work. So if you could go to the website www.menti.com, my colleague Hannah, I think, is going to control this page. How is it going to work, Hannah? Are you going to share your screen, or will everyone have their own screens to look at?
Well, I was going to ask the question because I can share my screen and then people can see the results as we go through. Or
yeah, just send me the results at the end, I think, Hannah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So if everyone just clicks on the link, you should, and then kind of input the code as well, you should come up with a screen that says what is and what is not a grant, and then I'll kind of click through and release the questions to you. Probably give about 20 seconds per question.
Yeah, and you all you got to do is say yes or no, guys. So hopefully it's not going to stretch you too far, and let's see how we get on.
So has everyone got the link open?
Yeah, it's saying please wait or ask the presenter to open voting at the moment.
Yeah, okay, lovely. I'll get the first question up.
Are we nearly there?
We're on question 2. I'll just open up question 3. question 5's up now, and just 2 more left, Chris. And just the last question. I will just get. Do you want me to share the results up?
Yeah, would you mind? I'll stop sharing. It'll be interesting to see how the results come out, because what you probably notice is some of the questions seem very similar to each other, and I think what this really starts to show is that the subtleties between the use of grants and the use of contracting are pretty close. So first one, please, Hannah. Lovely. So is a grant if you're commissioning services on behalf of your ICB? The answer to that is no. It is not a grant if you're commissioning services. If you're commissioning services, then you're asking for specific need for a specific set of performance and outcomes, and that falls under the commissioning responsibility and ultimately the procurement responsibilities. Next one, please, Hannah. So the yin and yang on this is that a grant is nearly always when you're supporting a charity's existing activities. So, and this is the difference between the grant and the contract. The grant is if someone's already doing something that is aligned and similar to what you need within your health and your local authority requirements, and you're looking to complement and continue that work with them. So a grant is supporting the VCSE's activities. Next one, please, Hannah. Is a grant a contract for services? No, it's not. Based on the first point that we made, is that it is not a specific contract for a specific set of circumstances. Next one, please, Hannah. Does the grant funding oblige the VCSE to provide specific services? The answer to this is no. We within the form of the contract, you can ask the VCSE to continue performing areas, but you can't define and expect them to meet certain performance and KPIs or service requirements. The next one. Is grant funding unconditional? Absolutely not. I'm glad everyone's got this one right. It's along the lines that you're still allowed to require whatever the grant is given for to ensure that money is spent and used for that purpose. Next one, please, Hannah. And finally, again, yes. As spending any public funds, we really need to ensure that in undertaking the grant funding, that it is used for economic and effective use of the ICB's resources, and it should always be considered and reflected on that basis. So what I hope this range of questions shows is that it is fine margins between understanding of what we can and what we should and shouldn't be using grants for, and once we've written a grant, what we can and can't expect from the providers when they're looking to work with us on that. Thank you for that, Hannah. So I'll continue to. Oh, why is that? So is everyone back on my screen? So I presume you are. I can't. No one said anything to the contrary. So under the original NHS Act 2006, there was provision built within that to allow what was at the time PCTs, which then morphed into CCGs, which have now morphed into ICBs. And watch this space. I'm sure there'll be another iteration in the next few years. But it specifically says a clinical commissioning group, which has now been amended, by the way, under the 2022 Act, may make payments by way of a grant or loan to a voluntary organisation which provides or arrange for provision of services which are similar to the services in respect which the group has functions, which again defines that similarity between, are you contracting for distinctive services or are you just asking the organisation to continue with its existing functions? And then it says the payments may be made subject to the terms and conditions as the group's considered appropriate. So there's no mandatory requirements for the terms and conditions you can use, but later on in our talk we'll go through an NHS standard document for that and how the benefits that can bring. So grant funding is not subject to Public Contract Regulations 2015 procurement rules, but in line again with good practice and with spending public funds, we should always demonstrate transparency, fairness, and in some areas we should provide a reasonable selection and justification for what we do and whether we choose to go through competition or not. So why would a local authority or the NHS want to use a grant to work with a charity? Well, VCSEs have a particular unique place within our society, don't they? They can contribute to our sort of social fabric and the social value that we want to get from a lot of this. But the key areas that we pulled out here is that we believe that VCSEs are great at promoting innovation. They're often very focused. They have often single missions, and they really understand the patients and the clients regarding their health and well-being. So they're sometimes best placed to provide that innovative thinking. They're really good at hearing and amplifying individual voices. So they're trusted within our societies, and they're really skilled at the outreach and engagement. I'll try not to get too not Little Britain. What's the one with Royce and Bayesian? No, but they're also really good at local problems for local solutions, and because they're very focused, because they work within the communities, they provide that real intimate view of the world of how they can support the work we want to do. It allows, using grants with VCSEs allows them to build capacity within their organisations where our objectives align with them. It provides them with that sort of continual bit of headroom and funding to support that. They're particularly good at engaging with communities, very similar to the hearing and amplifying voices, but they really have roots into established relationships and have the trust of particular communities. And probably the one of the main points of those is that compared to perhaps some of the monies that we may see within the NHS and commissioning of services, quite often with grants, a little bit of money will go an awfully long way and will really help to make a difference within that. So it's worth considering all of these factors when you're looking at allocating grants through of how they can support and help you on that. There's various different types of funding that we can identify when working with VCSEs. Predominantly, we look to provide revenue funding, which is a standard ongoing annual funding or one-off funding, even for a single year, but to contribute to those organisations' general running costs and the delivery of their missions, the support that they're looking to deliver. But you can, on occasions, provide grants to help support capital funding of equipment or other bits of kits that may be helpful to do that. If it's a reasonably low value, then you just need to make sure that it's clearly identified that it is purchase of new equipment when you reach any agreement with them. But there can be occasions when grants could be for a considerable amount of money, and when we look to do that, I think it's really important that those agreements are clearly defined, and you may find that the commissioning authority may want to have some sort of hold or ability to recover those assets, to ensure that that the funding that they have is protected in a way. And you can use grants for loaning money to organisations. It's probably a little more unconventional. It really probably requires deep consideration as to the any contractual arrangement that you have between them, and certainly the NHS standard contract for grants, an agreement for grants, doesn't cover loans. So if you're looking to loan money to VCSE organisations, really have some sort of consideration as to how you will manage the financial transactions around that, and they can be complex. So just a few thoughts on some sort of practical steps to making a grant happen. And again, for all of you good old-fashioned commissioners out there, some of this will be reasonably straightforward for you. It's always important to really think carefully about the purpose of what you're looking to do the funding, and what you have the intended outcome to be. You know, what's your commissioning objectives, and what do you hope to achieve from that? Now, part of the time it may simply be that you wish to engage with VCSE organisations and for them to come up with their innovative ideas. We talked earlier about how good they are at that sort of thing, and so it may simply be that you have a pot of money that you wish to maximise the benefit of that within your community. It might be appropriate to link up and make use of intermediaries within the VCSE. There are some organisations that act collaboratively with each other to manage the voices of lots of smaller organisations. One of the benefits of larger organisations is they have the infrastructure, the capability, the resources, and the back office to support these type of commissioning arrangements. A lot of the time, VCSE organisations don't have that infrastructure. You know, they're single issue organisations with a real mission and focus on the well-being of their particular client base. So intermediaries can sometimes help that. And also think about your other commissioning partners. So if the NHS work collaboratively with local authorities, is it likely that your approach to working with the VCSEs could be improved, could be could the sum of the whole be greater than the individual parts on that sort of stuff? So again, think about working with other commissioners. But the main part of this really is decide how you're going to go through an application process and how you're going to reach agreement and deliver your grants to organisations. Now, I've been involved in quite a few different types of arrangements, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and relate them to TV programs, so you can create images in your mind as to how these things go around. So one opportunity is more like an apprentice interview, where a proposal is developed, and you sit down, you have a conversation with the VCSE, look at its purpose, look at the value, look at the return on investment that you think you might get, and reach an agreement at that point as to who you want to work with. You could also do, and we've certainly been involved in these, where you have a Dragon's Den style of arrangement, where you have wise people sitting there passing judgment on a range of proposals, and the VCSEs come along and they present their requirements for their how they believe they could spend their monies, and those are considered and reflected on by the panel, and decisions then made as to where best to allocate the funding. Another approach is a bit like the X Factor style arrangement, where individual VCSEs will provide the presentation of their proposals, and they're voted on by members of the public, so to speak. And we've had issues like this before, where we've done it with GP practices, and we've had members of their practice, the patients, come along, and they vote with tokens as to which of the charitable proposals are best suited for that particular area. And then of course, being a procurement person, there's the more formal selection, evaluation, and review type arrangements. But all of these can work, but you just need to ensure that in undertaking them, that you maintain the public sector ethos of openness, transparency, fairness, and non-discrimination, and follow those principles through that. So once you've actually agreed that you want to give a grant to an organisation, the NHS has now come up with a model grant agreement, and I think it's probably important that you do use an agreement to describe the relationship between the two organisations. We all know that the real benefit of the contract is not at the time of writing. The real benefit of any agreement is to manage issues when they start to go wrong. And it talks about the rules of engagement, talks about how you will manage these issues. So the model grant agreement covers really the sort of the scope and what you intended to be the relationship between the two organisations. Some standard rules of engagement and how you will deliver the services and how you will report on the obligations that they have within it. Third-party funding is an interesting part of this agreement. What often happens with VCSEs is they make multiple applications to cover a particular challenge that they have, and they might be successful at more than one of them. And what this model grant agreement covers is ensuring that you only pay once for the services that they're looking to deliver. And that's covered within that agreement. But also working with health and social care arrangements, it's important to document the standards of how their staff will behave and the safeguarding arrangements surrounding that. And so again, if you're dispensing public monies, it's essential to know that the people who you're asking to work with you or you're supporting have the right safeguarding and rules apply. And again, as far as repayment arrangements are concerned, this is when we say that if things start to unfold, it gives you a mechanism of how to recover monies if you needed to do so. And it also talks about how long the arrangements are for and what happens if you wish to cease them. And it also has specific sections. I talked about capital funding before, about how to deal with assets and how to describe them and how to ensure that if the public body wants to take a lien over any of these assets, how to do it and what to do, and what happens at the end of any agreement and who owns the product after that. Within the model agreement, it's got various schedules, but it's really simple. It firstly describes what you're looking to do and the details of any assets. There's a schedule on the money, how much, how often, and whether you're going to pay for it in a one-off fee or whether you're going to do a regular scheduled payments. And if they've provided any proposals as to what they were looking to do, you write those proposals into the agreement. And again, that then ensures that the promises that are made at the beginning are understood and committed to all the way through this agreement. So as far as grants are concerned, I think that's probably covers most of what we want to chat about. Before I go on to understanding contracting and the contracting options that Mike was originally going to talk about, are there any questions about grants, about how we're approaching them, or how you can award them within your authority? I shall take silence that everything has been so absolutely clear and wonderful that there can be no questions. Everyone's really shy. Gail, yes, I agree with what you put in the chat about giving you the right answers for those. We'll provide those as one of the slides when we publish the slides. Okay, so let's move on to start talking about formal contracting with organisations. Now, as we've already established, this is when the local authority or NHS is actually commissioning services that it needs to do that, which again is different from the funding the VCSE to continue with its existing mission. And we're looking particularly in these issues about collaborative working with VCSEs. So this isn't about what we would call bilateral contracts, where you have a specific relationship between one commissioner and one VCSE organisation. It's talking about how you can perhaps develop a contracting approach that allows you to contract with many organisations, but have it through a structured and well-managed arrangement. So that we start to look at the considerations that are helpful to start your planning. So you need to understand who is actually going to manage the contract that you award. Is it going to be the commissioning body themselves? Is it going to be a provider within the organisation, within the system? Is it going to be a foundation trust, a community provider, a local authority? And it's important to understand that, because the nature and the type of contract that you want to use may be influenced by the type of organisation that holds the ring on the contract. And it's also useful to understand that, has that organisation got the resources, the wherewithal, and the approach that can manage dealing with complex contracts? You need to look at forming relationships. What we believe is probably the best language to use around some of this is working in alliances. So as far as the NHS is concerned, and we'll go on to some of the arrangements later, is that we are not very good at one-to-many contracts, and we actually don't have formal contractual arrangements within the NHS that allows that one-to-many arrangement. All of our agreements are bilateral, and so if you want to work with multiple organisations under one structure, you need to have additional contractual responsibilities built in around how you will work as an alliance, and how the relationship between the members will flow, how people can join the alliance, how they can leave the alliance, and what obligations and commitments they're giving to working within that. And we'll talk a bit about that in a second. We also useful to know about how the money is going to be spent. So there's various elements around that. Is there going to be a single and simple funding allocation between all of the providers? Are we going to have a funding allocation based on control and management from the contract manager, or will the funding work through alternative methods, and also if there's some NHS funding, if there's any commissioner funding, how much of that can be allocated to anyone who is managing the contract, and there may be a sort of a pot that's required for simply the resource of managing the contract, and you may also want to identify some money for some gain share or pain share that you may want to build into the contract, that as organizations truly start to reap the benefits of working together, some of the improvements that will give can then be reinvested back into the main objectives of the contract, to harness and enhance and constantly improve the cycle of the services that are provided. And finally, you need to consider the resources that you're going to put into this, and we touched on this already a little bit. It's does the contracting team have the capability, the resources, and the management skill to manage what can often be quite complex relationships over quite a complex contractual format? So it's important to choose your partners wisely, and ensure that whatever alliance agreement that you build in is strong with regard to obligations and relationships and relationship management. So alliance contracting, here's how we undertake alliance contracting within the NHS standard contract. You've got a standard commissioner who has individual contracts with the 3 providers shown here on the graphic, and then wrapped around all of that is an alliance agreement that sets out the roles, responsibilities for the collaboration, and how to act in the best for service principles. And this is the thing that I think a lot of organisations struggle with, that we're so focused, particularly within the NHS and NHS Foundation Trusts, of management of our commitments, our responsibilities, our own budgets, and our own core issues, that it's sometimes quite hard to take a hit for your organisation for the wider benefit and of the wider collaboration and the alliance for that. And this is where some of the behaviours and some of the contractual responsibilities start to flow and rub up against each other. We try to have these arrangements set on an equal status, but actually what you may find is there may be some asymmetric relationships where one provider may take a greater leadership role, or they may take a bigger bite of the pie because of the nature of their role within the alliance. But whatever happens, everyone's roles need to be really clearly understood and defined, and that there can be no ambiguity around that. The overall performance of the service needs to be really understood, and that everyone comes to the table clearly to ensure that they manage the performance and the development of the targets through their own individual contracts and through the responsibility of the wider alliance across them. And as we said, there may be an option within this to put some gain share or pain share within there, that if we're not performing, everyone has to put a little bit more commitment in, or if we're overperforming and really reaping the benefits of the intended alliance, then that can get reinvested through innovation to deliver better and more services to the population. If you went to a textbook and looked at alliance contracting, there is a more, well, not simpler version, but it's a formal contractual arrangement that all individual providers are much more contractually bound to individual contractual outputs across a multi-provider platform. So it's all the principles that we've talked about of understanding rules, responsibility and obligations, delivering the contract, equal status, and all of these things stand, but the contract itself contractually binds them to the joint performance and the outcome and the output of that contract. But as we say, at this moment in time, the structure and the nature of the NHS contract doesn't really allow for this. Now, whether that will change as we get into more provider collaboratives and the multiple collaboration arrangements that may come out of the intention of the 2022 NHS Act, where that joint working, the delegation of commissioning responsibilities within your system to provider collaboratives may then start to change the way that some of this works. But I think it'll be an organic growing thing rather than a sort of a big bang arrangement on that. And perhaps a more understood contractual relationship is when we have a prime provider contract. The commissioner has a bilateral contract with a specific provider. That provider is a provider of services, but also an integrator and a subcontractor, and so that they will then seek to deliver the wider services through a range of subcontracts with other providers to help deliver that. And all of these are individual contractual relationships. So as far as the commissioner is concerned, they've got a single relationship with a single provider to deliver a range of outcomes. That provider takes the responsibility and the funding flow to receive the money from the commissioner and to allocate that money through their subcontractual arrangements and their own provider arrangements to deliver the overall contract. But the relationship between the delivery, the key performance indicators, and the reporting is two ways between the commissioner and the prime provider, and they take the financial risk and they ensure that the overall service delivery happens. Now, again, this is far more of a contractual relationship with regards to the delivery, and relies very simply on subcontracting and contract delivery, and perhaps less so on the flow of patients through pathways, through mutual understanding of how collectively organisations can work together to deliver what is the wider commissioning requirements, which is what the alliance arrangements will provide them for. So those of you who are familiar with the NHS contract, just a slide now on where, by using the governance that could be built into the contract of how these amendments could be made to complement working with multiple organisations working around a sort of alliance style agreement. So in Schedule 2, we look at how to make the arrangements for the contract, what the first 12 months is going to look like, and how the additional services complements and works around each other. You can detail and provide the outline of the approach to contract management, the role of the alliance, and the support for commissioners within that. And it also talks about the exit arrangements for the contract, what to do at the end, and also managing how you can be agile and dynamic with regard to alliance members. You know, what one of the things that is always a concern of these complex multi-provider agreements is that things don't necessarily stay the same forever, and so you need to have quite clear definitions of how to manage people who maybe aren't contributing or no longer wish to contribute to the alliance, and how you can bring on new parties to that as well within a mutually agreeable arrangement. Schedule 5 allows you to describe the roles and responsibilities of the trust and also all members of the alliance. And if you are using subcontracts, how you're going to nominate them, name them, and bring them into the contract itself. Schedule 8, at this moment in time, looks at local system plans and the obligation. So this was an attempt by the NHS contracting team to preempt the legislation that's came in July 2022 with regard to integrated working, collaborative working, provider collaborations, and understanding the benefits of joint system working and the outcomes of joint system working could be. And it starts to describe the rules and relationships for that. What I understand, looking at the consultation documents for the contract for next year, is they're probably looking to delete this schedule, because everything that's described within the schedule is now written into law. So you don't necessarily need a contract to tell you what you're obliged to do by the law anyway. But it's again, but they are suggesting though that the local arrangements that you would probably want to put in there can be redefined under one of the Schedule 2. I think it's 2G, which is local plans to be relied upon, which then sort of tries to bring back all of the system plans into a mutually agreeable arrangement. And finally, we've in an earlier iteration of the work that Mike has done in Devon, we've written a separate alliance contract that we've reached agreement with the providers and then built into the standard contract to ensure that every individual organisation's bilateral agreement has a responsibility to work and behave in the alliance. So if you look at the slide where we talked about alliance contracting, the individual two-way contracts happen between the commissioner and the provider and any subcontractors, but the written into those contracts is the wider collaboration to say this is how we will work together. Here's the rules, roles, responsibilities, and how all of that will work. And that's probably the most critical part of any contract amendment that you make, to ensure that's written in. And again, there's a model contract that was written back in about 2017 for alliance arrangements, and this was when the thought of multilateral community providers and ACPs, acute and community providers, were first conceived, and it was thought that there would be these alliance contracts left, right, and centre. That hasn't really materialised, but reading through the agreement itself, it's really still strong and it's still relevant today for being able to work between multiple organisations and individual commissioners for that. And I think that was the end of Mike's slides. Yes. So I'll stop sharing. So as far as the contractual relationships that you'll be looking to build up between the relationships, that probably covers most of that. Are there any questions, any thoughts on what we've shared today? Or has my monologue driven you to distraction? Diane.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, so I mean, we know that there's new legislation coming through. Do we have any idea what the time frame might be for that? And, you know, should we be sort of moving towards, I mean, I know the alliance stuff, we're all moving towards that, but should we be sort of utilising the new legislation or ideas around it now?
My gut feel is yes. And it more and more so we'll be looking to do that. And I think I'm probably not telling tales out of school, Diane, that we're probably looking to do something with your organisation around musculoskeletal services, around similar alliance arrangements, where we have a a patient pathway style specification, and we need to make sure that all the providers who are party to delivering that specification also have an overarching alliance collaboration agreement built between them. But it works particularly well for VCSE, which is why one of the reasons why Olivia's asked us to have a chat on that side.
You're talking about Sussex, I'm presuming.
Yes.
You know, I've moved up. Yes. I mean, we've already got an alliance in the mental health world.
Yes.
With Pathfinder in West Sussex, but we are sort of looking, hence why I'm here. We're looking at how we can get our VCSE and move across the whole of Pan Sussex, sort of under a bit more of a generic approach if we can. But I'm sort of interested in, you know, what can we sort of get readiness for the new legislation and the sort of frameworks that we might be able to establish, because I'm only here for a short while, but I want to get as much as I can to help everywhere in anticipation, really.
Well, I don't know if Paul's on, because he came to one of our earlier chats, but obviously Paul O'Toole is your resident expert on alliances.
I know. Yeah, we're very lucky. Yeah.
I think the important thing in all of this, Diane, is to really understand what your commissioning ask is, what you're looking to achieve, and similar to what we did in the grants is how do you bring all the parties together to bring their relative strengths together to deliver that. If all you're going to do is create a complicated contractual framework, it may not be best to do that way. But if you can bring organisations together, that the sum is greater than the individual parts, then actually that's when these arrangements really fly.
Yeah, so I mean, Pathfinder, you know, it does work. It really does work, and I think it's what can we do and learn across the other patches as well. So
but they're not easy to put together, are they? And they, you know, it takes, which is why we mentioned about that commitment of the organisation that wants to run it. That there does need to be an absolute understanding that these things take management effort, they take time, they take strong leadership, strong leadership,
and they go very much through the sort of storming process as well. You know, it's sort of allowing for that within the sort of, you know, organisations all bring their different strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's probably been what some steep learning we've had from Pathfinder in terms of, you know, they've gone through a lot of that process and they now become very mature in terms of what they're delivering, but we're sort of, you know, in readiness now for the next stage, really. But also that contract is coming towards an end, hence my question around the new legislation, and what opportunities have we got? Because, you know, why break something when you've actually got something that's going really well?
Yeah, and with all of this legislation, the really interesting part is how does it work in reality? So it's charming and lovely to write into NHS Act amendments to say that you will work in an integrated fashion. You will work collaboratively. You will ensure that monies will be used for the greater good and all of these sort of things. But the reality of the documentation that forms that, the behaviours of the organisations involved in that, because it is quite a strong leap that some of these organisations have to take between individual organisation performance regarding multiple organisations trying to deliver an overall benefit to their system. And I hope that some of the lessons we learned from COVID and working collaboratively in those issues around PPE and other areas can be converted to some of this as well. Couple of minutes left. Any other thoughts? Olivia, anything from your side to wrap us up?
I wonder whether Vince wanted to come in. You appeared on the screen now. Well, I was just going to say, my understanding is that there is an NHS England public board meeting at the end of this week, and there will be a paper on community mental health transformation with a particular focus on the key role that the voluntary and charitable sector can play and how integrated care boards are best placed to drive on this. So this is very timely, hopefully. And there's one more or a couple more, depending on where the legislation may be published or not on the provider selection regime.
Yes, watch this space is all I can say about that at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's some comments and some chats in the discussion bar.
Oh, okay, I'll pick up on those. Okay.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone.